All right, 5.2, solving inequalities by multiplication and division. So last time in 5.1, we looked at addition and subtraction of inequalities. Now, we did a little bit of, well, we actually didn't do any multiplication or division, but now we will. So today, we're just going to add a little bit to what we did last time. Okay? So, when multiplying or dividing, here's the deal. If we multiply or divide by a positive, we're going to keep the inequality as it is. Okay, so for instance, if I have like 3x is, let's just say that is greater than 9. Okay, to get x by itself here, I have to divide both sides by 3. Right, so if I divide both sides by 3, we're dividing by a positive number, which means that the inequality will remain the same. The one thing that students often forget about is when you divide by a negative, you will have to switch the inequality. Okay, the reason for that is that the sign changes and we go into, like if you think about the number line, right? This is the thing that makes the most sense, okay? If you think about a number line, here's 0, here's -2, here's -10. Okay, when you're in the negative realm, the bigger number is actually smaller, right? So the reason that we flip the inequality is related to this idea that the bigger numbers now, since we changed sign, have become smaller. So now we're not talking about things bigger than something, we're talking about things less than, or vice versa. Okay, so whenever we multiply or divide by a negative number, we switch the inequality. So let's go back to that same example, but we just change a couple little thing. If we have -3x is, did I say less than? I think I said greater than, is greater than 9. Okay, here I would, if I want x by itself, I have to divide by -3. Whenever you divide across the inequality, okay, so that means like on both sides of an inequality, if that happens, you have to switch the sign. So this becomes x is less than -3. Okay, notice that the sign has to flip whenever you divide by a negative, and it is only when you divide by a negative or multiply by a negative across the inequality. Okay, because when it changes sign, the bigger number actually becomes smaller. All right, so just be careful of that. That's the main rule of the day. So let's look at example 2. For example 2, we have n divided by -6 is less than or equal to 8. So to get n by itself, I actually have to now multiply both sides by a negative. If you multiply both sides or divide across the inequality, you flip the sign. So I'm going to multiply, let me get back to my red here. I'm going to multiply by, and instead of doing it with a times sign, let's do it like this. I'm going to multiply both sides by -6. Okay, when I do that, this part goes away and I'm left with n, but now it'll be greater than or equal to -48. Okay, now notice what I have here. If they want you to graph the solution, I'm going to give you just these bars. Okay, and what I want you to do is, I want you to just label them. Okay, so here, we can make -48. Well, let's just make it right here. Just make sure you label at least where you're at, where you start, -48. Okay, and then it says the n values, if you put this in set notation, it'd be the n values where n is greater than or equal to that. Okay, well, if you think about this, if it's greater than, it's going to have to go to the right, right, because 0 is over here. So we're going to fill in our circle at -48, and we're going to go that direction, because all the numbers in that direction are bigger than -48. Okay, so here, example 2b, to get p by itself here, we're going to have to actually, since it's being multiplied here, we'd have to divide both sides by -4/3. So divide both sides by -4/3. That makes this go away. Since I divided by a negative, I have to switch my inequality. And then let's think about this. We have -10, we can say over 1, is being divided by negative 4 over 3. Okay, going back to grade school, when you did a lot of this stuff with fractions, in order to divide a fraction by a fraction, you actually flip it and multiply. So this becomes negative 10 over 1 times negative 3 over 4. So I flipped it. And when I do that, I get 30 over 4, which is the same thing as 7 1/2, I believe. Okay, so you can leave it in either form. I don't really care. Back of the book, I don't know which one they'll have. But this will be, I think this one's easier to, I would actually say put it into a mixed number form like this instead of keeping it improper, since you're going to graph it, and that makes it easier to graph. You can see where 7 1/2 is easier than you can see where 30 over 4 is, right? So my final answer here is P values where P is less than 7 1/2. Okay, so if they're having you graph this on a number line, I'm going to go to 7 1/2. I'm going to have an open circle, and it's saying that it's all values less than that. So I'm going to go that direction. Okay, this is 2C. So it's still example 2, but we're looking at a third example, C. So here, notice here, you guys, if I want to get n by itself, this is where you have to be careful. You can multiply both sides by 5, right? If you multiply by 5, that'll get rid of the 1/5. So if I multiply both sides by 5, notice I didn't multiply by negative 5, only by positive 5. Here, this goes away. I get m is greater than or equal to negative 15. Some people are like, oh, there's a negative there, I better switch the inequality. No, you didn't divide or multiply by a negative number, so you're going to keep the inequality the same. So it's the m values where m is greater than or equal to negative 15. Okay, so let's label a number line here. Let's just call this negative 15. Okay, and we're going to have a closed circle there because it says or equal to. And then we're looking at values that are bigger than, so they're going to be to the right. All right, so that's 2C. And then finally, here's 2D, kind of same deal. Here I'm multiplying by 3/8 by t, so I'd have to divide by 3/8 or multiply by 8 over 3, right? Flip it. So 8 over 3 is what I'm going to multiply by. Notice that's positive. Okay, so since it's positive, the inequality stays the same. So I have t values where t is less than 8 times 5 is 40. So 40 over 3. Okay, if I take 40 and divide it by 3, 3 goes into 40. Let's just do this out. 3 times, and we're left with 1, so 1/3. So 13 1/3 is where I'm at. Okay, so it's the value is less than 13 1/3, so I'm going to say, okay, well, here's 13, here's 14. 13 1/3 is somewhere in here. It's open circle because there's not an or equal to, and it's less than that number, right? All the values are less than, so we're going to go this direction. So at least have 2 points on the number line so I can see that you know which direction to go, and then you should be good. Example 3 here, okay, trying to get p by itself. How do I do it? Divide both sides by 8 since it was being multiplied. So I have p values where p is less than. Let's take 8 into 58. Okay, 8 goes into 58, I believe 7 times. 7 times 8 is 56. I'm left with 2, so this is the same thing as 7 2/8, right? So there's where I get my 8, that's my remainder. Or that reduced would be 7 1/4. Okay, so the p values where p is less than 7 1/4. All right, so here's 7 1/4 approximately. We're going to put an open circle, and it's less than, so we're going to go this direction. All right, so there's example 3. I think I have a few more in example 3 here for you. Okay, so, and in your textbook, by the way, you guys, this was or equal to. So if you're following along in your textbook, that would be a closed circle, but I didn't put that here, so I'm going to leave it as is. For 3b, notice to get r by itself, you would have to divide by 6. Even though we're taking a negative and dividing it by a positive, we're dividing both sides by a positive number. We're not going to touch the inequality. Okay, so we get r. But we will touch it because the r is on the right side, so we're going to switch that around. So if I want to switch this around, right now the alligator's eating the -7. I want it to remain eating the -7, but I want the r on this side. So to do that, I'm going to put my r over here, make sure the alligator continues to eat the -7, and we have this guy. R values where r is less than -7, so at -7, I'm going to have an open circle, okay, and then I'm going to go less than. We're going to go that way. Okay, for this one, this is now 3c. To get h by itself, I have to divide by a -12, right? I'm dividing by -12 to get h all by itself. And if I divide both sides by a negative, I have to flip my inequality. Hopefully you noticed that before I said it. Okay, so I have 15 divided by -12. 3 goes into both of those, so if I divide both of these by 3, I can reduce this. I get 5/4, -5/4. But I don't like it improper, so that would be the same thing as -1 1/4. Okay, so let's go to -1 1/4. We have an open circle, and it's saying that h is less than, so it's all the numbers less than that guy. Okay, and final example in example 3. Here I'm multiplying by a -1/2. So to undo that, I can, to get in by itself, I can multiply this by -2, okay, which is the inverse, right? So if you have -1/2 times -2, you end up with 1, and that's what I'm trying to do to get in by itself. Okay, the other way that you can think about that is right now you're multiplying -1/2 times n. So you could, to undo that, divide both sides by -1/2, which is the same thing as multiplying by -2/1, which is what I did. Okay, so just to show you that. So here you go. And you have n is now, since you're multiplying by a negative across the inequality, we have n is greater than -12. Okay, so at -12, we have an open circle, and we're saying all values bigger than that thing. All right, guys, that's it for now. We'll catch you guys in class.